I remember the day I took my car to Rick's auto shop like it was yesterday. The shop sat at the end of a long gravel driveway, nestled between overgrown oak trees that had probably been there longer than the business itself. The building was a weathered blue, paint chipping away to reveal layers of history underneath. A rusted sign hung crookedly above the entrance, swinging slightly in the autumn breeze. The place had character, that's for sure. The kind of character that makes you wonder if your car will actually make it out in better condition than it arrived. I'd been having trouble with my transmission for weeks. It started as a small hesitation when shifting gears, but gradually worsened until the car would shudder violently whenever I accelerated past 30 miles per hour. After putting it off for longer than I should have, I finally admitted defeat and called the shop that my neighbor had recommended. Ask for Mike, he'd said. He's a miracle worker with transmissions. So there I was, standing in the cluttered office of Rick's auto shop, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and the sound of pneumatic tools firing in the garage bay beyond. The walls were covered with calendars, not just from the current year, but from years past. Some featured classic cars, others showcased women in bikinis posing on hoods. It was like walking into a time capsule of automotive culture. The receptionist, an older woman with reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain around her neck, took my information and told me it would be at least 3 hours before they could give me any answers. 3 hours in a place with nowhere to go. The nearest coffee shop was 5 miles away, and the only seating option in the waiting area was a sagging couch that looked like it had absorbed decades of anxious waiting. Is there somewhere nearby I could wait? Maybe grab some lunch? I asked, already calculating how much a rideshare would cost me to get somewhere civilized and back. The woman was about to answer when a voice behind me cut in. I can give you a ride back when we're done. I turned to see a tall man wiping his hands on a red rag. This had to be Mike, the transmission whisperer my neighbor had mentioned. He wasn't what I expected. Most mechanics I'd encountered were either gruff older men with permanent scowls or young guys with too much energy. Mike was somewhere in his 40s, I guessed, with dark hair graying at the temples and eyes that seemed to assess my car troubles before I'd even explained them. Let me explain why this moment matters. When a stranger offers you help, especially in a vulnerable situation like being stranded without transportation, you make split-second judgments about their character. Is this kindness or something else? In that moment, I weighed my options. Wait for hours in this uncomfortable space, spend money on rideshares, or accept this unexpected offer from someone who, for all intents and purposes, was a complete stranger. That's really kind of you, I said, surprised by the offer. Are you sure it's not too much trouble? Mike shrugged, a simple gesture that somehow conveyed both indifference and reassurance. I need to test drive it anyway once I figure out what's wrong. Might as well be useful. His voice was steady, neither friendly nor unfriendly, just matter of fact. The receptionist seemed unfazed by this interaction, as if Mike regularly offered rides to stranded customers. She handed me a clipboard with forms to fill out, and I provided my contact information, card details, and signed various liability waivers. All the while, I was thinking about this unusual offer and whether I should accept it. Mike disappeared back into the garage, and I spent the next 15 minutes filling out paperwork and then awkwardly checking my phone, pretending to be busy while actually wondering if I'd made the right decision in coming to this particular shop. The sound of tools clanging against metal and muffled conversations between mechanics drifted through the open door. When I finally handed back the clipboard, the receptionist, whose name tag read Doris, gave me a nod. Mike will call you when he's figured out what's going on with your transmission. If you're not taking him up on the ride offer, there's a diner about a mile down the road. Not fancy, but they make a decent burger. I think I'll wait for Mike's assessment first, I replied, settling onto the ancient couch, which exhaled dust as I sat down. The next hour crawled by. I alternated between scrolling mindlessly through my phone and flipping through dog-eared car magazines from at least 5 years ago. Finally, Mike emerged from the garage, wiping his hands again on that same red rag. Found your problem, he said without preamble. Transmission fluid leak. Damaged seal. Can fix it, but I'll need to order a part. Won't be here until tomorrow afternoon. I felt my shoulders slump. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a logistical nightmare. I lived 20 minutes away by car, worked from home, and had meetings scheduled for the following morning that I couldn't miss. As if reading my thoughts, Mike added, still offering that ride home. and I can bring you back when your car's ready. In that moment, the offer felt less like kindness and more like a lifeline. That would be incredible. Thank you, I said, relief evident in my voice. Mike nodded. Give me 15 minutes to clean up and finish the paperwork on your car. While I waited, Doris explained the expected costs and had me sign another form authorizing the repairs. The estimate made me wince, but what choice did I have? My car wasn't going anywhere with a damaged transmission seal. True to his word, Mike returned in 15 minutes. He'd changed from his work coveralls into jeans and a plain black t-shirt. His hands were clean now, though dark grease remained embedded in the creases of his knuckles, the permanent mark of someone who works with engines for a living. Ready? He asked, jingling a set of keys. I nodded, gathering my bag and jacket. As we walked out to the parking lot, I realized I had no idea what kind of car he drove. Would it be some souped-up hot rod? A practical pickup truck? Maybe an old beater that he kept running through sheer mechanical willpower? The answer surprised me. Mike walked toward a meticulously maintained older model Volvo sedan. It was navy blue, spotless, and looked like it had just rolled off a showroom floor despite being at least 15 years old. Nice car, I commented, genuinely impressed by its condition. Mike gave a slight nod as he unlocked the doors. They build these to last. Just need proper maintenance. The interior was just as immaculate as the exterior. No fast food wrappers, no coffee stains, not even a stray receipt in the center console. The leather seats showed minimal wear, and everything from the dashboard to the door handles gleamed with the attention of someone who truly cared for their vehicle. As I settled into the passenger seat, I noticed there was no personal touch to the car. No air freshener hanging from the mirror, no photos stuck to the dashboard, not even a preferred radio station preset. It was as if the car existed in a state of perpetual newness, untouched by the personality of its owner. Mike started the engine, which purred to life with a smooth, quiet confidence. He backed out of the parking space with precision and headed down the gravel driveway toward the main road. That's when the silence became apparent. He hadn't asked for my address yet. Oh, I said, breaking the quiet. I live in Oakwood Heights, the townhouse complex off Maple Street. Mike nodded. I know it. And that was all. Here's where things started to feel unusual. Most people, when giving a stranger a ride, fill the silence with small talk. They ask what you do for work, comment on the weather, or at least turn on the radio. Mike did none of these things. He drove with both hands on the wheel, eyes focused on the road ahead, maintaining exactly the speed limit. The silence wasn't exactly uncomfortable, but it was noticeable. I found myself wondering if I should initiate conversation or respect what seemed to be his preference for quiet. After a few minutes of internal debate, I decided to break the ice. So, have you been working at Rick's for long? I asked, keeping my tone casual. 15 years, he replied without elaboration. I waited for him to continue, to perhaps ask how I'd found the shop or tell me something about his experience there. When nothing came, I tried again. My neighbor recommended you specifically. Said you were great with transmissions. This earned a slight nod. I like transmission work. More interesting than oil changes. The conversation, if you could call it that, fell flat again. I glanced out the window, watching as we passed through town. The familiar storefronts and traffic lights offered some comfort in what was becoming an increasingly strange experience. Let me take a moment to explain why this matters in understanding human interactions. When we engage with others, especially strangers, we rely on social scripts, those unwritten rules of conversation and behavior that help us navigate unfamiliar situations. Mike wasn't following the script. He wasn't being rude or threatening, but his minimal responses and lack of reciprocal questions created a void where normal social exchange should be. As we drove, I became increasingly aware of small details about Mike. His hands on the steering wheel were steady, his posture upright, but not rigid. He checked his mirrors regularly with the discipline of someone who took driving seriously. At stoplights, he came to complete stops, never rolling through. When changing lanes, he used his turn signal well in advance. He was, I realized, a perfect driver, following every rule with precision. We were about halfway to my home when I decided to try once more. Have you lived in this area your whole life? It was a harmless question, the kind strangers exchange every day. Mike was quiet for so long that I thought he might not answer. Then, just as I was about to give up, he spoke. Born here. Left for a while. Came back. Each phrase was delivered with finality, like the period at the end of a sentence that couldn't possibly require elaboration. I nodded as if this was a complete answer and turned my attention back to the passing scenery. We were entering my neighborhood now, the familiar streets bringing a sense of relief. Soon this unusual ride would be over, and I could retreat to the comfort of my own space. As we turned onto my street, I pointed to my townhouse. That's me, the blue one with the white trim. Mike slowed the car and pulled up directly in front of my home. He put the car in park and then, to my surprise, turned off the engine completely. This is where the story takes its most peculiar turn. In normal circumstances, when someone drops you off, there's a routine. The car idles while you gather your belongings. You exchange quick pleasantries. Thanks for the ride. No problem. See you tomorrow. And then you exit the vehicle. The driver waits until you're safely at your door before pulling away. It's a dance we all know the steps to. But Mike turned off the engine and then sat there, hands still on the wheel, looking straight ahead. He didn't say anything. Didn't turn to me. Just sat there in complete silence with the car off. I felt a surge of uncertainty. Was he waiting for something? Did he expect to be invited in? Was this the moment when a seemingly innocent ride home revealed some darker purpose? Thank you for the ride, I said, my hand moving to the door handle. I really appreciate it. Mike didn't respond. Didn't nod. Didn't even look in my direction. He just sat there, still as a statue, staring through the windshield at nothing in particular. The silence stretched between us, growing more awkward with each passing second. I cleared my throat, wondering if he'd somehow forgotten I was there. So, I'll expect your call tomorrow when the car is ready. Still nothing. No acknowledgement whatsoever. My heart rate picked up slightly. Not out of fear exactly, but from the sheer strangeness of the situation. I had no framework for this interaction, no social script to follow when someone who has given you a ride home simply shuts down all communication. Well, thanks again, I said, finally opening the door and stepping out. I half expected him to drive away the moment I closed the door, but he didn't. He remained exactly as I'd left him, engine off, hands on wheel, staring forward. I walked up the path to my front door, keys already in hand. As I unlocked the door, I glanced back over my shoulder. Mike hadn't moved. His Volvo remained parked at the curb, engine off, with him sitting motionless in the driver's seat. I stepped inside my house and closed the door behind me, immediately moving to the front window to peek through the blinds. The blue Volvo was still there, Mike still inside, still in the same position. I stood watching for several minutes, wondering what on earth was happening. Was he having some kind of episode? Should I call someone? Go back out there? After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 minutes, Mike finally moved. He started the car, executed a perfect three-point turn, and drove away. No wave, no glance toward my house. Nothing to acknowledge the strange ending to our encounter. I stood at the window long after his car had disappeared from view, trying to make sense of what had just happened. It wasn't frightening exactly, but it left me with an unsettled feeling that I couldn't quite shake. That night, I found myself thinking about Mike more than I would have expected. Who was this mechanic who offered rides to stranded customers, but couldn't manage a simple goodbye? Was he socially awkward to an extreme degree? Did he have some condition that made normal interaction difficult? Or was there something more deliberate in his behavior? A boundary he was intentionally setting with customers? The next day, as promised, the shop called to let me know my car was ready. It wasn't Mike who called, but Doris from the front desk. When I asked about arranging a ride back to the shop, she informed me that Mike had gone home early with a migraine, but they could send another mechanic if I needed transportation. That's okay, I said quickly, perhaps too quickly. I'll find my own way there. I ended up taking a rideshare to the shop, paid the bill, which was exactly as estimated, no surprises, and drove my newly repaired car home without incident. I never saw Mike again, despite returning to Rick's for regular maintenance over the next few years. Somehow, our schedules never aligned, or perhaps he was deliberately working on other vehicles when I came in. This experience has stayed with me, not because it was dramatic or life-changing, but because of its peculiarity. In a world where most interactions follow predictable patterns, Mike and his silent goodbye stood out as a reminder that we don't all move through the world in the same way. Looking back, I wonder if I misinterpreted the entire situation. Perhaps in Mike's mind, the transaction was complete. He had fulfilled his offer to drive me home, and nothing more needed to be said. Perhaps words were difficult for him, and he expressed his professionalism through actions rather than conversation. Or maybe he was simply lost in thought about the next transmission he would repair, his mind already back at the shop, while his body was still in the car outside my house. I'll never know for sure what was going through Mike's mind during that silent moment in the parked car. Engine off, no goodbye offered. But I've come to appreciate the encounter for what it taught me about expectations and human connection. Not all interactions fit neatly into our preconceived notions of how people should behave. Sometimes the most memorable encounters are the ones that leave us with questions rather than answers. And in an odd way, I find myself grateful for that ride home, not just for the convenience it provided, but for the reminder that beneath the surface of everyday exchanges lies the vast complexity of human experience. Each of us moves through the world carrying our own histories, our own ways of connecting or disconnecting, our own unspoken rules for navigating relationships. Mike, wherever he is now, probably doesn't remember me or that ride. But I remember him, and the lesson his silence taught me about the assumptions we make about others. Sometimes a ride is just a ride, a job just a job. And sometimes, the most eloquent goodbye is no goodbye at all. Total_char_count, 13,741.